evening, and welcome to the Weekly Voice, presented by VNN, bringing you today's top 10 Canadian news stories on August 15, 2025. Let's get started. At Toronto Pearson International Airport, border officers stopped what they're calling a bold smuggling attempt hidden in plain sight. On July 19th, a traveler arriving from Jamaica was flagged during a routine inspection. When officers searched the luggage, they discovered several cans of processed cheese. But inside was something very different. Packed within the cans was 18 kilograms of cocaine, with an estimated street value of nearly $2 million. The Canada Border Services Agency confirmed the drugs were seized and the suspect taken into custody. The RCMP has now taken over the investigation, though charges have yet to be confirmed. Authorities released images of the cans to show how the narcotics were concealed, calling the seizure another example of their work to stop drugs at the border before they can enter Canadian communities. The U.S. Ambassador to Canada, Pete Hoekstra, is accusing Ottawa of undermining the North American Free Trade Agreement with its latest counter-tariffs on American goods. Speaking to Global News, Hoekstra said Canada's actions have pulled the rug out from CUSMA, the pact also known as USMCA. The dispute began when Ottawa responded to Donald Trump's tariffs, which now sit at 35% on non-free trade goods and 50% on steel, aluminum, and copper, by slapping a 25% duty on nearly $30 billion worth of U.S. imports, including orange juice and appliances. Prime Minister Mark Carney has suggested Canada could roll back some tariffs to ease pressure on domestic industries, but Hoekstra pointed to growing mistrust and even personal attacks on Trump's team as making negotiations harder. Ontario Premier Doug Ford warned Trump could cancel the deal altogether with one signature. For now, the future of Canada-US trade remains uncertain. In India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi delivered the longest Independence Day speech in the nation's history, speaking from the Red Fort for 1 hour and 43 minutes. The address, delivered on the 79th anniversary of India's independence, was both symbolic and sweeping, touching on India's economic growth, digital transformation, infrastructure achievements, and its place in the global order. Modi's speeches have grown longer every year since 2014, often stretching beyond an hour, and this one surpassed his own record of 98 minutes set in 2024. His delivery mixed scripture, statistics, and patriotic appeals, drawing repeated applause and chants of Bharat Mata Ki Jai. Analysts note the contrast to leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru and Indira Gandhi, whose Independence Day addresses were often under 40 minutes. Modi, however, views the platform as an opportunity to narrate India's progress as a long journey. Supporters say the length reflects ambition, while critics argue it risks losing focus. Either way, the speech cemented his place in political oratory history. China has escalated its trade fight with Canada by announcing a massive preliminary anti-dumping duty of 75.8% on Canadian canola imports. The decision, which takes effect this week, follows a year-long investigation that Beijing says uncovered unfair subsidies in Canada's agricultural sector. The move threatens to wipe out Canada's $5 billion canola trade with China, the world's largest importer, and could shut the door to one of Canada's most important export markets. Futures for rapeseed meal dropped immediately after the announcement, showing the global ripple effects. Industry experts say Australia could step in to fill some of the demand, but not fully replace Canadian supplies. The tariff also comes alongside a new investigation into Canadian pea starch imports, suggesting the dispute could spread to other crops. Ottawa now faces increasing pressure to respond, as the standoff unfolds, even while China and the United States have paused their own tariff war to negotiate. Ontario Premier Doug Ford is speaking out after a reckless driver accused in a deadly crash was revealed to have struck Ford's own car earlier this year. The driver, 18-year-old Jaiwin Victor Kirubananthan, is now charged in connection with an August 3rd head-on collision that killed 35-year-old father of 3, Andrew Cristillo, and injured his wife and children. Court records show that in January, the same man crashed into Ford's vehicle while traveling over 200 kilometers an hour. Ford, who was not injured, called the accused an idiot and said Cristillo's death is heart-wrenching, especially as his widow faces a cancer diagnosis. A GoFundMe for the family has already raised over $400,000. Ford says the community must rally behind them, and the case highlights the dangers of stunt driving on Ontario's roads. The accused is set to appear in court Friday. Canada's labour market took another hit in July, with 40,800 jobs lost and the national employment rate slipping to 60.7%, its lowest in 8 months. Statistics Canada says most of the losses came from full-time positions, a troubling sign after strong gains in June. The unemployment rate held at 6.9%, but only because fewer people were actively looking for work. Economists warn. The numbers show Canada's recovery is fragile, with youth employment particularly weak and job creation slowing in key sectors. The data is likely to put more pressure on the Bank of Canada to cut interest rates in September, as policymakers balance high inflation with a cooling labour market. Analysts say the July report is a reminder that momentum in hiring can shift quickly, and that permanent job growth will be critical for long-term stability. Ontario's real estate regulator has ordered iPro Realty, one of the Toronto area's largest brokerages, to close its doors after uncovering a major financial shortfall. The Mississauga-based firm, with over 2,400 agents, will officially shut down on August 19th. The Real Estate Council of Ontario says existing deals will be completed under supervision, but clients with ongoing offers will need to re-sign agreements once their agents transfer to new brokerages. Deposits are expected to remain safe, though commissions owed to agents may only be partly covered by insurance. The closure comes as a shock to the industry, with many agents scrambling to relocate. RECO says its priority is protecting consumers, while agents and staff are left to navigate the fallout of what regulators call a serious breach of financial responsibility. Ontario's provincial government has announced that all public servants will be required to return to the office full-time by January 2026, ending the hybrid work model introduced during the pandemic. Starting this fall, staff will move to 4 days in the office before returning to 5 days a week in the new year. Premier Doug Ford says the decision is about boosting productivity, collaboration, and mentorship, while also supporting downtown businesses that rely on foot traffic. Critics, including public service unions, argue the move strips workers of flexibility and ignores the success of remote work arrangements. The change mirrors similar policies at Canada's major banks, but Ford insists the decision was made independently. The move marks one of the strongest pushes yet by a Canadian government to end remote work policies entirely. The city of Mississauga has secured a court injunction to restore order at Ridgeway Plaza after more than 2 years of disruptive gatherings and street racing. The injunction, granted by an Ontario Superior Court judge, empowers Peel Police to block roads and enforce strict measures during unsanctioned events planned for mid-August, including Pakistan and Afghanistan Independence Day celebrations. Residents and businesses have long complained of noise, fireworks, and dangerous driving at the plaza. City officials say they fully support cultural celebrations, but they must take place in safe, sanctioned venues, pointing to major festivals like Muslim Fest and Mosaic as examples. Officials also criticized the plaza's condo corporations for failing to address the disturbances, forcing the city to take legal action. They say the goal is to ensure Ridgeway Plaza remains safe for residents, visitors, and businesses, while still celebrating Mississauga's cultural diversity responsibly. Trade tensions are escalating as U.S. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra warns that Canada's counter-tariffs have undermined the Canada-US-Mexico trade deal. Ottawa imposed the tariffs earlier this year in response to President Trump's sweeping hikes on Canadian exports, which now include a 35% tariff on non-free trade goods and 50% duties on steel, aluminum, and copper. Prime Minister Mark Carney has suggested Canada could roll back some tariffs to ease pressure on domestic industries. But Trump has hinted he may go further and scrap the deal altogether. Ontario Premier Doug Ford echoed that warning, saying Trump could end CUSMA with a single signature. With Washington also questioning Canada's F-35 fighter jet contract, tensions are running high. For Canada, the challenge will be defending its industries while keeping the free trade framework alive in an increasingly uncertain climate. That's all for today's top stories. Thank you for joining us on The Weekly Voice, presented by VNN. Stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll see you next time.